Hello and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place where we share creative and inspiring learning in our schools. Season 4, Episode 54. Hello and welcome back to the Education on Fire podcast with me, Mark Taylor. Today I'm joined by Jonathan Savage, and he's the Managing Director of UCan Play, and he's also a published author. He's Chair of Trustees for the Love Music Trust, the Music Education Hub in Cheshire East, and he's a Reader in Education at Manchester Metropolitan University. So we've got some really insightful resources, some understanding and some real sort of educational background here to try and support you in your music in schools. So Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi Mark, it's really my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Fabulous. Can we just start with a little bit of history about you and how you got involved in music and education and sort of how that sort of brought you through to being involved in UCan Play and actually working within a university as well?
Sure, yeah. I started my music education when I was very young, like many people. I learnt to play the piano with my piano teacher at home, with my parents, and I also then had drum lessons from the age of 11 in Surrey, was part of the Surrey County Music Service. And I enjoyed my music education. I played in various ensembles, and I ended up going to the Royal Northern College of Music to study percussion. Didn't really enjoy that, so after a year of studying there, I went and joined a band, and I played keyboards for a while professionally. And we had some children, and I thought, I probably ought to get a proper job. So I went back to university at that point, to the University of East Anglia, and I did my music degree there, followed by a teaching qualification. I then taught in two high schools in Suffolk, or two secondary schools. I taught at Stowmarket High School and then Debenham High School, where I was head of music for a while. And then in 2001, I applied for the job, a senior lecturer post at Manchester Metropolitan University. And we moved up to Cheshire to do that in September 2001. So I then started working with my colleague Will Evans, running what is the largest postgraduate certificate in education course for music at secondary level. At the time, we had around 70 students each year. I'm still doing that job today. And we have around 35 to 40 students each year. It's the largest course still in the country. Wow. And whilst doing that job, I used to visited a lot of schools around Manchester and the northwest of England. And I saw what I thought were the consequences of some quite poor advice that was being given to schools about their uses of music technology in particular. And that was the key reason for forming my company, UCan Play. We wanted to give teachers in schools good advice about music education and in particular the use of music technology. And we wanted to do that in a sort of non-partisan way, without having to worry about sort of, selling particular products at particular prices and all that sort of thing. So in its formation, UCan Play was just that, a consultancy company. We worked with schools on projects and we helped advise them. We also worked with companies in the music industry to help them understand the music education market as well, and to help them design products that were more suited perhaps to music education in schools. And one of our key partners right from the very beginning was Routledge, the music instrument manufacturer based in Swansea, obviously the parent company based in Japan. And we've worked closely with Routledge and subsequently other companies ever since to help them do that. A key part of our work at that time was also designing software for music education. And I had some friends who were good computer programmers and artistic and graphic designers and composers, etc. And we pulled those people together and used their talents to create different pieces of music software, which some folk might remember, software like Sound to Picture, which was a guide to the world of contemporary sound design, Sound to Game, which was a piece of software that was about sound design for computer games, obviously, and other pieces of software as well. And that was a really enjoyable early start to our company. And more recently, certainly in the last 4 to 5 years, what happened was we lost some of that consultancy work with the music industry because of cuts to their funding and various other bits and pieces that were going on at the time, notably following the financial crash. And we asked those companies whether or not we could carry on advising and doing some work with them on a free basis if we were able to then take on the selling of their products into the education market. And quite a few of the companies, with Roland being the first, have allowed us to do that. So today we do sell musical instruments into the music education market, and we do that at a preferential price, which has been agreed with our partners. And we fund from the profits of those sales. We fund our wider work. We're a not-for-profit company, which means that we use the profits that the company make to support music education in the grassroots. Really, we support ensembles, we support individual instrumentalists, and we support community projects through our profits. We're not allowed to pay large dividends to shareholders or directors or anything else like that. We're not quite a charity, but we are very conscious that the profits that we make get fed back into supporting the company's work.
That's really interesting and a fantastic way to be, because as we chatted just before we started recording, the music education within schools is sort of disappearing in lots of ways, and the funding is diminishing. And I think anything which anybody outside the teaching profession can do to help support that in any way it can, like you say, whether it's supporting an individual or providing instruments or supporting with someone's great project idea, I think is invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're in a lucky position now of, we're a small company, but we have, a good turnover in terms of the work that we're doing each year, and we are able to generate, some profits which we can invest back into music education in different ways. I would agree with you that the recent years for music education in the United Kingdom have been difficult as a result of some I would think are some poorly handled political choices by our policymakers. That said, we've all got to try and make the best of the situation as it is. And each week, actually, I do receive emails from heads of music in schools who are facing very difficult cuts to curriculum time and also cuts to funding. And they're equally important, both of those. I mean, the squeezing of music education in the curriculum is a real concern at the moment as a result of things like the EBAC, for instance. But similarly, the sort of marginalisation of music education in many schools and the perception amongst some head teachers that music education is like an add-on to the curriculum rather than a core part of a curriculum offer is also worrying. We as a company, we've tried to respond to that, and we've invested some time and resources into the creation of a funding guide for music education, which is freely available from our website. It's basically around 12 to 13 pages of ideas from the projects that we've worked in with schools, and from stories that music educators in those schools have told us and teachers have told us about how to raise funds for music education in different ways. And it signposts, some charitable funding sources, of course, which there are around, which people need to be aware of. But it also outlines some practical steps that heads of music and teachers of music in primary schools can take to also generate funds themselves. So hopefully that's one small kind of positive thing that we can point your audience to.
Absolutely, and I have to say that's how I came across UCan Play to begin with. Was I was searching for things funding related, because I know from as a parent as well as being in music education that the issue is where can we find a little bit of money to help it. Once we've got to the point where you've got someone who's keen to actually help and put music at the heart of a school, or at least as an integral part of what's going on, as you say, because the funding isn't there, how do we go about that? And it is those practical tips, isn't it? It is working with your PTAs. It is actually just making it a bit more maybe cross-curricular in a way that you can use funding in slightly different ways that just enables it to be in a more integral part of your curriculum.
Absolutely, I would agree with that entirely, and I would like to emphasise, I think, what you've just said in relation to how music relates to other subjects. I think one of the ways that I've noticed that people have been able to get funding for music education is when they've aligned music to, English or mathematics or the sciences, for instance, which do have a preeminence in our schools, and if you can create cross-curricular projects where you're meeting your aims as a music educator, but you're also supporting other areas of the curriculum in terms of what they're doing, I think those kinds of projects do stand a good chance of obtaining external funding. For instance, I can give you a quick example. We ran a project in our town recently called Sandbach Then and Now, which was a project whereby we wanted our local residents and school children and adults as well to understand more about the contribution that the folk of Sandbach made to the World War I effort. And we were able to get a grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund for a project that linked together music and the arts and the local history side of things. And I don't think without that heritage and history element within that, we wouldn't have been able to obtain that funding. But we were also able to, on the back of that, to do some interesting music education projects in our local primary schools.
I think that's absolutely brilliant, and what I find more and more interesting the more people I chat to about this is that one of the most important things is the whole idea of partnering, isn't it? Is the fact that it's very hard when you're a teacher in school just thinking, right, I want to create this, and how do I go about it? Because your time is limited and your resources are limited. But actually, it's using the professionalism and expertise of people around you, and I guess music hubs, and as you said, you're an advisor and chair of trustees of a music hub. Does that how do teachers sort of approach you directly, or the hub specifically, in terms of going about getting that extra support rather than just being passive and maybe taking on a wider opportunities or first access project which they get offered, and actually going the other way and actually going to the hub and saying, look, this is our idea, could you help us find some way of either funding it or certainly give us a pointer in the right direction of how we might make it a reality?
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right that partnership working is absolutely essential in today's education climate. And the days of a teacher of music or a head of music doing everything themselves are well and truly numbered, or if they haven't finished already. I honestly believe that working in partnership can be the most rewarding and beneficial thing for everyone involved. And it's at the core of how we run our business. At UCan Play, we have some very strong educational partnerships with institutions, schools, colleges and universities, and we also have very strong partnerships with the instrument manufacturers, Roland, Korg, PreSonus, Nord, and all of the other, Steinway, and all of the other companies that we work with directly. In relation to music education hubs, they have a specific remit to provide that partnership, if you like, to the schools and other music education organisations in their local areas. And at the Love Music Trust, we take that incredibly seriously. And yes, we're not about just offering services to schools. That's part of what a music education hub should do, but it's only a part of it. The other part of it, which is equally important, is that they're seen to be listening to schools and other organisations in their area, asking them questions about what they're doing and how they can support their work rather than just seek to augment it or replace it, which is clearly often not desirable. So the conversation between a music education hub and the other music educational organisations in an area needs to be two-way, and it needs to be consistent. We need to find systematic forms of that communication being sustained over longer periods rather than just being one-off occasional kind of conversations. And we need to work hard at understanding what we're all trying to do and bring those aims together in a coherent way. So, I mean, I like to think, we do that quite well in the Love Music Trust, and we've built over the last probably longer than that now, 6 to 7 years, a very close network of organisations that share a set of values and aspirations for music education. And as a result, the young people in Cheshire East can have access to that network. And, if you're a talented youngster playing the drums in a local secondary school, yes, you can benefit from the school ensembles that you're part of and maybe the drum teacher who comes to visit your school. But you've also then got the opportunity maybe to work in an area-wide ensemble, to access some specific lessons at the Royal Northern College of Music, which is one of our partners, to be inspired by the world of music in terms of the next level, maybe the professional world, by visiting artists or students who've already worked through the system and have seemed to be been successful. And you're opening children's eyes, aren't you, to the potential of music education and where it can take them in life generally, and that can be very, very rewarding.
I think that's it, and it's where I sort of have to sometimes have a little word with myself, because I'm sort of sometimes have quite sort of strict memories or strict ideas about my journey into the profession, you know. And it was because I had a thriving school with lots of music, and I could see lots of ensembles going on. I had friends that were in county ensembles and that kind of thing. And it started back in my primary school with a teacher who was just very musical and really wanted to give us all an opportunity. But it is that was how it was then, and that's great. There are still some schools that have got that, but they're a little bit more sort of further apart than they used to be. And it's finding what you need in the environment that you actually find yourself in, and from there you can make some good choices. And it sounds like the sort of thing you were just talking about is exactly that. You know, if you have the opportunity to start a lesson, or you have the opportunity to meet someone, it might be that you have to go out of school. It might be that you need to find organisations that can support you, not directly within your school, but as you said, again, it's just an early form of partnership, is it? An understanding that it's the relationships with people around you that are key, rather than necessarily just being spoon-fed a direction that takes you from A to B.
100%, Mark. I mean, I think there's a really key role for music teachers still in all of this. You know, skillful, passionate, well qualified music teachers are at the heart of a successful music education system. And you mentioned one or two teachers in your comment there that influenced your life, and I can look back into my life, and my son, for instance, who's now 23 and studying jazz drums at the Royal Northern College of Music as a result of receiving a brilliant music education in a local school here in Sandbach with an inspiring head of music. You know, there are always key people that shape our children's lives in terms of their musical sort of direction, but those very teachers, the really good ones, know that they're just part of a network of music educators, and you know, they need to. Well, I'm sure they do know, and all teachers need to know when they're dealing with, you know, specific children and specific talents. You know, that they can't provide everything those children need just through what they're doing, and so they need to be knowledgeable about what's going on outside of the immediate school environment in their local area, and make those positive connections to the work of other organisations, other people, other teachers, and not seem to be threatened by that, which I'm sure you know most teachers wouldn't be. So having that joined up approach in the teachers thinking about the opportunities that are available through the music education hub, that to me is one of the core things that good music education hubs are doing. They're not just about delivering stuff to schools. That's a small part of what they do. There's an awful lot of other stuff that goes on in music education hubs that supports schools and makes connections. And as I said in my first comment, you know, the conversations and the flow of information goes both ways.
Yeah, and I experienced that to some extent this week. Our youngest daughter did a concert with the local community orchestra, and they actually rehearse of an evening in the primary school, and so their Christmas concert, they invited the school choir to go and perform as well. So not only was it just a question of the school choir singing, then the orchestra playing a piece, there was some where they were playing and singing at the same time, which was lovely, and also just giving them the opportunity to actually hear an orchestra live, you know, because that sort of thing just doesn't happen as much as it used to, or the opportunity for that. And that's just because within the community there was that opportunity, and it was taken up, and that's a really exciting and a positive thing, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree entirely. I mean, in our part of the world, in the Northwest, you know, you'll know that brass bands are a hugely important part of our lives, and you know, we're in Sandbach, for instance, we're lucky to have, you know, the world famous Foden's band, originally part of the Foden's Lorry Works, and Foden's band have, you know, they're a championship section band and they have a lot of success. We also have the amazing Lions Youth Band, which are a fantastic youth band. They rehearse in a local Sandbach school, and there are loads of other community bands as well. Now, you know, when children are learning brass instruments in primary school, you know, as the music education hub in Cheshire East, you know, the Love Music Trust made a decision that there's no point of us creating a Love Music Trust brass band, because there are all these fantastic bands already. So what we've done is we've gone out to talk to those bands, we've looked at their work, we've helped support them, financially. We've provided a signpost for children in schools who are working on, with brass instruments to join those bands to help increase their numbers and help support their development, and of course the progression of the brass playing through those bands, into higher ensembles and etc. Is there for all to see. So I think that's a good example of that sort of joined up approach to music education, using excellence in other ensembles in your local area to help build programs for children, rather than just seeking to do it all yourself.
I think that's great, and as you say, a lot of these people have the time and the passion and the resources to, like you said, there's no point in reinventing the wheel, because then you just have two versions of the same thing, and
yes.
By definition, the idea of partnership and collaboration is actually working together, isn't it, and doing the best for the children that they have. And
absolutely.
And just sort of one step from that is the fact I also see that you have some studios as well, and it sounds like you've had quite a lot of exciting things happen and through there. So how does that work within the company?
Yeah, so what we wanted to do was we wanted to create a space in our local community for young bands to come and work, and adults as well. But we particularly had young people in our minds when we set it up. So we started a rehearsal studio. It's called the UCan Studios. It's based in a mill just outside Sandbach, which we rent from our landlord, who owns the whole of the sort of estate where this mill is based. And yeah, we've created the space, and it's full of instruments and technologies that we got from our various industrial partners. And yeah, we have a regular number of young bands and professional bands and others coming into that space to rehearse and use the facilities. And we try to keep the cost of that as low as possible to help, particularly with younger people who are in full-time education, to help them develop their music making. And I mean, we've done it we're in our third year with that particular project. And I mean, it has been a real eye-opener for me personally, in that, I was lucky. Well, I was lucky. I mean, the way things worked for me was that I received quite a kind of classical music education, I suppose you might say, through playing in youth orchestras, in Surrey Heath Youth Orchestra and Surrey County Youth Orchestra and the National Youth Orchestra, and as a percussionist. And I love classical music to this day. But a classical music education is obviously, of a particular type. And most of the folk that I meet who are coming into the studio have not had a classical music education. They've learned their instruments, and the bands have been brought together in a completely different way, learning to play instruments from YouTube videos, or by listening to their favourite artists, or whatever it might be, and teaching each other in sort of peer groups or whatever. And we've got dentists and plumbers and gas fitters and all sorts of folk who come into the studio, and it's just reminded me personally how important music is in all of our lives. It's sort of like I kind of call it a social glue. It kind of brings all of these people from a huge range of different settings together. They can share their passion and enjoyment of music, and we're particularly excited in the UCan Studios to see and support the development of original music. That's one of the things we love when bands come in and they're working, like a group of lads are coming in at the moment on a Thursday night. They're coming in every Thursday to produce an album's worth of material, which they've nearly done. And in February next year, they're going to go down to a studio in London and record their album, and then try to promote that. So that's a group of lads in their early 20s. They're really passionate. They're very, very good songwriters, and it's just great to be a small part of their journey in providing a space for them to work in.
So it really sounds as if where you are in Sandbach, that there are so many opportunities, and you're obviously an integral part of that in so many different ways, from being the managing director of UCan Play through to the music hubs and all of that kind of thing. So I think for anybody listening, the first thing to think about is, what is it that I'd like to provide for my students? What is it that I'd like to be able to achieve, or some kind of project or something which you think, that would be an excellent thing to do? And within that, just start looking around your community. What opportunities are there? Are there local orchestras? Are there local studios? Speak to your music hub and see what connections they have that they might be able to put you involved in. Because what that really does is it just then opens the world, because what you think you might like to do, there's probably something even more out there. It's just a question of finding it. And that's really an integral part of the job these days. It's just actually knowing what's available and how you might like to link that with something that you're doing within your school. So I really would just advise just going out and seeing what there is around. And you normally find you'll just meet the right person at the right time who'll put you in contact with the right person, and then a whole world of opportunities that'll open up for you without you really having to work too hard about it. And I think that's then really exciting. So rather than us having this kind of sense of we don't have the time or the money to do any music in school, all of a sudden all these things just become open and the possibilities start to become endless again, which is a much better position to be in, certainly as teachers, and especially to give that opportunity for our pupils as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. A couple of things just in response to that. Yes, look locally, but of course, the internet has transformed how people can be brought together. And you found me through social media, I think, or through searching for some funding materials.
That's right.
We're not linked together, as far as I know, locally. I'm speaking to you from Sandbach. I'm not entirely sure where you are.
Yes, I'm in the Midlands. Yeah, so we're not local.
Okay,
that's right.
So we're definitely not local, but we're having I'm really enjoying the conversation, and hopefully people are finding it helpful. But look for the sort of mega connected hubs. Look for the organisations that have good networks already and seek to tap into those. And I mean, for instance, UCan Play as a company is it's a small company, but we've got a very good network. Our entire business has been built on partnership working. We connect to internationally famous brands, Steinway, Roland, etc. And we've managed to kind of build into their sort of networks, if you like, through their marketing to help establish ourselves a little bit. Manchester Metropolitan University is a super connected organisation across not just Manchester, but the United Kingdom and internationally. And one of the brilliant things about working for a university is you're connected to all sorts of other interesting projects and people and organisations which can help enrich, not just the life of the staff and students at Manchester Metropolitan University, but also others around us. I'll give you an example. We had the brilliant Wayne Ellington, who's a gospel choir director, who comes to work with our students each year. Now his choir won the BBC Songs of Praise Gospel Choir of the Year competition last year, and he's just a brilliant person who enriches all of our lives through his passion for singing. And the students, of course, really benefit from the sort of technique and expertise he brings around running and organising gospel choirs. And the Love Music Trust and your music education hubs are well connected organisations in your local areas, which as a music teacher or just a teacher of any other subject, you can tap into and bring resources around your students. So absolutely use the internet, use social media to connect to people, and look out for those super hubs, if you like, or mega connected organisations that you can benefit from as well.
That's great advice. And so could you just let us know what's the best way of getting in contact with you, your website, that people can see those resources that you said about the funding, which I think would be really useful for people. And also just to say, if you go to educationonfire.com, we'll have links to all these things as well. But just as a parting place for people to come and get that information that you've been talking about.
Yeah, we have a website, as I'm sure everyone would expect. So it's www.ucanplay, spelt UCanplay.org.uk.
That's fabulous. And Jonathan, thank you so much for chatting. It's been really interesting, and it's great to hear someone who's got so much passion, but also have the practical abilities and the connections and the know-how to help join all these things together. And I think that's the kind of support that, as educators and teachers, it's really exciting to hear, just to know that despite all the difficulties that it may seem on the surface, there are some great opportunities out there.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate you getting in touch, and thanks for the invitation. And I hope your audience have enjoyed the podcast, but also, more importantly, that they've got brilliant ideas for taking music education forwards. And we are very happy to help in any way we possibly can.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Education on Fire podcast. For more information of each episode and to get in touch, go to educationonfire.com. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.